How's it going, YouTube gang? It's your boy Optima, back with a brand new series called Runeterra Roundtable. I thought this was a fun idea to hopefully foster a little bit more kind of more concise, more actual direct meta discussions, but also do it in a way that's just not long drawn out videos, because I know a lot of us got short attention spans. Alright, you guys, so unfortunately this video did not end up being like a quicker meta discussion video, as I think it's just so hard, especially in a new format like we're in right now, to just quickly discuss everything that's kind of going on and to really just get the full picture from what we really want to be doing with this series. So rather than looking at this as a quicker meta discussion series, I think it's best to look at this series as a series that provides you a plethora of perspectives. I feel like sometimes when you're listening to two people on a podcast or listening to someone on their stream discuss the meta, you're hearing one very biased opinion based on what decks they enjoy playing. Generally that has a lot of influence on their meta kind of thoughts and opinions. And rather than getting just that one biased opinion, you can get three biased opinions, and I try to throw in my little 2 cents when I feel like it as well. So four biased opinions instead, rather than just one opinion from one person. So yeah, just a way of getting multiple people all discussing these things rather than just one. And I still think that's a very fun way to go about these meta discussions. So sorry that the video is not short, but I think you guys will still enjoy it, especially with the people we have in the video. And I hope you still stick around for the full length. Thank you. So thank you to anyone who's watching this video. I appreciate the support. You can definitely go a little further. Likes, subscribing, comments. You guys know the drill. I appreciate it all. And most importantly, I appreciate you guys being here. We got some awesome guests for this episode, as we will continually try to have 3 known, or at least making move, competitive players in the Legends of Runeterra community for this series, so you guys can really hear from players who are playing this game day in and day out and got some pretty well-rounded opinions on what's good, what's bad, and all that. So let's get into introducing everyone. So first we got Drizoth. If you want to say hi to everyone.
Hi, I'm Drizoth. I'm probably most hated for popularizing TFBiz in the tail end of that metagame. I'm a top ladder player, and I do a little bit of writing for Giant Slayer on analysis.
Awesome stuff. Next, we're going to have Jay Sensational, also goes by Jason.
Hey guys, what's up? Jay Sensational here. I am not as high on ladder as Drizoth. I'm currently hard stuck diamond right now, but beyond that, I have top 16 twice in seasonals, and I brought Yasuo to the first one, so that's what you guys might know me for.
All right, and last but definitely not least, we got Closing Time with us. How's it going, man?
Hey, so you might know me for getting 33rd in the seasonal. That was pretty cool. I'm a streamer. I'm on Twitter. I post some kind of bad decks sometimes. You can check me out there. Other than that, I'm just, hanging out. It's good to, you don't have to ask where I'm at this season on the ranks. Don't worry about that.
It's none of your business. Okay. All right. Well, once again, thank all of you guys for taking the time out of your day to be here. Definitely really appreciate it. This kind of sets the episode or the series off in a pretty good place, having all of you guys. So thank you so much. We got some pretty good questions that relate to our recent expansion, the Guardians of the Ancient expansion, and how the meta's just kind of been developing, what's working, what's not working, what we wish was changed, what wasn't changed, heading into this expansion. And I hope it's something you guys enjoy. Before we get into the questions, I also wanted to say that there's going to be a link to a questionnaire that we're actually using for this entire series. I want all of you guys, once this video obviously goes live, once you're able to watch it, to also answer. In the next episode, we'll go over those answers and just see how much they differ from what was said by our lovely cast here. So it'll just be a cool compare and contrast thing. So I hope you guys enjoy that. But yeah, let's jump over to the questions and let's just get started. So we have the new cards. We've been able to experiment with them. We've been able to test a lot of different things. So we should be able to answer some pretty good questions on the meta. The first one's going to be obviously a hot topic in the competitive scene, is the Azir Aurelia deck, on whether this deck is good, whether it's really good, how good it actually is, and where it just kind of fits in the meta. Obviously, we could have the typical question of, is this an S tier deck or is it a good deck? But I think a actual more kind of I think a better question is it actually a healthy deck in the meta? And the reason I've kind of come across this question was during my testing of trying to make different decks and stuff, I actually had some kind of cool decks that felt like they were doing stuff, but then they just had no Azir Aurelia matchup, because this deck pushing like 9 damage on your attack turn just really nullifies a lot of strategies in the current meta. So my question to you guys is Azir Aurelia an actual healthy meta deck? All right, starting with you, Drizoth. Yes or no, or kinda? What is your opinion on this?
It would be kinda.
Kinda. Okay. Your opinion, Jay?
It's kind of.
It's kind of. And
The
you?
reasons might differ, but kind of's kind of cop out answer here.
Okay,
It is-
okay. And your opinion, closing time.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so we got 2 kindas, which I do definitely want some expanding on, but I think we'll actually get that with our last question. So I actually want to hear from you, closing time. Can you expand on why you think, yes, it is a healthy deck?
So there was a lot of talk that TLC was just going to sweep the meta coming in, including myself, and that was completely wrong. But I think one of the biggest things is that this deck has an insane play rate because it is the only new deck, completely new archetype, from this expansion coming in. So there's a lot of hype around it, and a lot of people are playing it, right? That being said, the reason why I think this is a healthy deck in the meta at the moment is, can you imagine if this deck was not included? Like, if this deck did not exist, can you imagine how memed on Riot would be for pushing 2 expansions back to back that neither really pushed any new archetypes at all to the forefront of the meta? Right, not counting, Thresh Nasus, because that only came after nerfs. I think that it's incredibly good that a new archetype came along and is dominant. I do hope that it doesn't settle at a 58% win rate, but I think that'll come with time.
That will come with time. Just a quick follow-up question. You don't think that players right now are running the deck unoptimally so that it should actually get better success moving forward?
It's possible. I think there's really not that many other ways to build it, though. Ione has a really small card pool of actually good cards, and kind of so
That
does
is
Shurima,
fair.
for that matter. So there's not a lot of ways to build this deck that haven't already been explored.
Okay.
There's probably just a couple choices, and there's a lot of decks that also counter this pretty hard.
Very fair assessments there, and I appreciate you expanding. Let's move on to our second question, which is going to be, what is the most underrated / sleeper deck at the moment? We do have a picture of Scargrounds there because I feel like that was the first choice of everyone when they were like, all right, Azir Aurelia strong. I want a deck that doesn't mind being attacked into or actually enjoys that with weak attacking units. However, I feel like Scargrounds' actual poor matchup started to get amplified once again. So where are we sitting at? What's the meta sleeper? And obviously, if you guys have a hot take or like a deck you plan on using in the near future, you can give us your kind of secondary answer to this question. But I would like to hear what you guys think on that one, and I'll go in opposite order. You can answer this one first, closing time.
All right. You want me to just go?
Yeah.
All right. I think it's Ruben Pile. It's the Zoe Vi deck.
Okay. And you, Jay?
I'm not sure. But I kind of like Tom Rocca.
Tom Rocca. All right, and Drizoff.
So I would actually say that Ruben Zoo is what people have decided to call it. And I would say
is it?
Ruben Zoo is better than my pick, but I would disagree that it's sleeper. My pick would have been Spectral Matron Cytherea Lady of the Clouds deck.
Oh,
But I'm
come
not sure
on.
where it goes because
I knew someone was going to pick
I don't know
that.
if that's
So,
sleeper
like,
either.
first version that people started running was Champless, and I think that's just indefensible. How do you pronounce that? And just play champs; they're broken.
All right, I
Okay.
think I lost the
Okay.
champless version, so I can't really say. But I do like
Okay,
it.
okay. Well then, yeah, I think Drizoff had the spiciest answer there. So, can you expand a little bit further on why you think the Cytherea list is an actual strong or sleeper pick right now?
So there's a lot of Demacia cards that are really good right now. Talking about like specifically champions, there's like people have figured out that Garen's just like completely insane against Blades because like what are they going to do? You're just going to level Garen. They attack twice and you level Garen on their turn. Like you can just level this champion regardless. People also experimented with like Shyvana for a similar reason. I think that one's a lot more suspect. There's also Callisto, which is interesting. Like all the cards in the Cytherea Lady of the Clouds deck were in the old like Callista, Vehu, and Dura aggro deck. But I think the Cythria Spectral Matron combo is really nice for kind of a top end. And people started doing really weird things to just like completely destroy aggro, where you start like Darkwater Scourge Mask Mother. There's just so much going on in this pile of cards that I feel like something can eventually come out of this that's pretty good. The like cards that people are obviously including the Oblivious Islander, Cythria, Spectral Matron, maybe Mobilize, the old Shadow Isles early game package, Blighted Caretakers, Cursed Keeper, Ravenous Butcher. All of those we know are good for stabilizing the board early, maybe getting an advantage. This top end seems good, and there's just so much left in this archetype. I will say the current versions I don't think are very good, but there's so much left to explore in this card pool that I have faith something is going to come out of it.
Cool. Thank you so much for elaborating so well on that point. And yeah, definitely makes sense. Let's move on to our next question that we have here. And that is going to be, was the nerf to one of the most polarizing cards? And I feel like right before we actually got this expansion, this was a huge hot topic on how we should deal with this card moving forward, and that is going to be none other than Atrocity. Was the nerf to Atrocity that made it 1 mana more expensive actually significant? And obviously this is going to be mostly centered at Threshnasis, but I do think that it is fair to consider invokes, maybe even the few people running Nightfall with this card. Are those actually still viable strategies anymore? Things to consider as you answer this question. So I'll actually start with Jay on this one. Yes, no, or kinda, as far as the Atrocity nerf being significant.
I think it got impacted for sure. Any card that gets 1 mana higher is going to get impacted. But was it significant? I don't think so.
You do not think so? Okay. How do you feel about that one? Closing time.
I think yes, it was significant.
Okay, and Drizza.
No.
Okay, so I stand in believing no as well, and I feel pretty strongly about that, considering that cards like Merciless Hunter just kind of came through and made a lot of other things not really matter. I would love to hear your opinion, closing time, on why yes, it was significant. I
Yeah,
need to hear
sure.
this.
So I think I wanna specify. I don't if significant your criteria of knocks Threshnasis down a tier, the answer is no, because it didn't. That being said, I have already I've played a decent amount of Threshnasis this season, and I've run into many scenarios where I was not able to keep up Rite of Negation plus Atrocity, where I would normally be able to, or play Nasus plus Atrocity my opponent, or I had 2 Atrocities in hand and I was not able to do so even at 13 mana. There are quite a few scenarios that you end up running into because this Atrocity is 1 more mana. I also think that it does hurt those more fringe decks, right? Like Invoke. I mean, it being 7 mana in a weaker archetype does hurt a little bit more. Poor They Who Endure is all I can say. You can't play that and also Atrocity anymore. I think this was a very good nerf. People were calling for this to be slow. I don't agree with that, but that's not the question. So I would defend it and say that yes, it is. But
I think you explained your point very well. Thank you so much for that. Let's keep the train moving, and let's get on to our next question, which is going to be, considering how Blighted Ravine activates, it should say activate, not activating, activates upon round start instead of round end, disallows a ton of counterplay spells, the ones that don't grant, that just give you it for that round, such as Sharp Sight. It disallows a lot of counterplay spells from working against it. Should it be changed to activate at round start? I know this would be kind of against the whole, it is countdown and all the countdowns kind of work at round start, but I do think it's worth considering, especially just the way that this card, it doesn't have a lot of ways to kind of get around it with the way it currently functions. So let's start with you, Drizoth. Yes or no? Should this actually be a change that is made?
No.
No. Okay. What about you, Jay?
I'm a little confused because I don't actually know the ordering. So because round starts don't happen at the same time, right? The person gets attack token first, gets a round start first. So in the sense that the round ends, I don't actually know who gets the round end first. Because if the person with the buff gets the round end first, they lose the buff first, right? Then the damage goes off. So I think it's a lot clearer when it's round start. And I think that is going to be a reason why I'm going to say no.
Jay just went full into the explanation. He was like, "I'm not having you.
Oh.
I'm not having your format."
No. I think it was necessary
You
to
need some
explain your
context there.
position, so no worries. No worries there at all. And you, closing time, how do you feel about that?
I agree with Jay. I think that he explained it very succinctly, and I would say no.
Okay, well, since we got that explanation, I don't think that's one we need to dive in any further, so we can just move on to the next question. And that is going to be on Right of Negation. Right of Negation in its current design straight up disallows cards like Riptide Rex, considering that Riptide Rex puts all of the little skills down, and they can all just be denied by Right of Negation from being viable, and is an extremely strong deny everything option for just 4 mana. Should it cost more in order to deny multiple spells? If your answer is this card should be done differently, that is almost a yes in a sense. So I wouldn't mind if you guys want to expand if your answer is no, but if you have some other way of going about the way this card should function, especially considering also, to go in more on this point, this is just another extremely strong tool in the Thresh Nasus pile. So yeah, what are our thoughts on Right of Negation? And I'll start with you, closing time.
A really tough one to answer, but I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
I'm gonna say no, but there's a strong but afterwards.
Okay. You, Drizoff.
So, I also have a complicated opinion on this, but my answer to the question as written would also be no.
Okay. And Jay.
Yeah, no, but ...
Okay. So it sounds like everyone may have a different way of going about this. So I will just choose a random one of you guys. Let's go with Drizoff. What is your but?
I think the interaction between Right of Negation and Riptide Rex is an interaction that I don't like. However, I don't think my problem here is with Right of Negation being too powerful in that interaction. It's that, why is Riptide Rex putting 7 skills or 6 skills in the stack now? Why is it 1 skill? It's really bizarre, especially given the fact that there's a spell stack limit that most people never hit, so they don't know about, but there can only be 9 things on the spell.
Oh, are you serious? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so if there's 9 things on the thing, you can't cast a spell. It won't let you.
We can't cast a burst speed, but...
Yeah, you can cast burst speeds, which is like incredibly dumb. It happens, the other thing that usually happens is if you Ancient Hourglass Talia, then Talia the statue, you end up with 3 Talias, and you attack, and it completely fills the stack, and your opponent can't respond.
That's so sick.
It's a
Talia meta.
really
Let's go.
dumb interaction, in my opinion, and it just doesn't make any sense why this isn't 1 skill. Like, okay, I made 3 Talias, so it's going to fill up 3 slots. I don't mind Right of Negation being a deny all for all skills or all spells and skills. I don't mind that part of it. I don't like that Riptide Rex arbitrarily splits up his skill into 6 things. I feel like deny should counter all of them, or Right of Negation should only counter 1.
Okay.
So,
That is a very fair explanation. Thank you
We're
for
talking
going
more about Riptide than Deny.
yeah, so the question is, do I want Right of Negation changed? The answer is no. I want Riptide Rex.
That is fair. That is very fair. Okay, let's keep it moving. And our next question is going to be rank from 1. So 1 is going to be the worst out of these 3 to play against. As far as you guys think, which is the most unfun or toxic in its inherent design that we currently have, and 3 being the best to play against. It feels fair. It feels fine. As far as which of the following you believe is most toxic / unfun to play against. So yeah, one of the options is going to be Thresh Nasus. The other one going to be the Watcher. I think it is. I think a lot of TLC doesn't feel that bad. It's specifically the way the Watcher works. And then Targon with its invokes. A lot of people have been very vocal saying that the fact that Targon has its 40 cards and then invokes to all these other options is like it has more of a deck than any deck it's facing that isn't Targon. So yeah, let's start with Jay on this one. How would you rank these from 1, 2, 3? And once again, 1 being feels the worst / most toxic / unfair, 3 being I don't mind it as much.
I'd have to go 1 Watcher, 2 Targan, 3 Thresholossus.
Great. Okay, let's go to closing time.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 1 Watcher, 2 Targon, 3 Threshnasus.
Okay, and then Drizoth.
We're in complete agreement across the board.
Okay.
Watcher, 3 Threshnasus.
All right, this is good to see. I thought there'd be a little bit more discrepancy here. Let's go with Jay. Explain your opinion there.
Yeah, if we're talking just about the Watcher and not like anything up to there, because a lot of decks can just beat up TLC before they get to the Watcher. But the Watcher itself is only counterable by Targan. I could be wrong, but even in Targan, you need a combination of 2 Crescent Strikes and an Equinox or Hush, or you just lose to like a double like Fading Memory hand, which feels really, really bad. And beyond that, there's just really no more counters to it. Like, sure, if your opponent plays like the real Watch and it dies, that's kind of on your opponent. But that's that. Targan invokes. It feels okay. I don't really like it that much just because it feels like they can just invoke a lot of different stuff that like really benefits them, and sometimes your deck just doesn't do as strong of a thing as them. And then their obvious win condition is usually relatively interactive. They play like a spell shield, elusive damage, and then atrocity it to your face, and you can't really interact with it unless of course you're in Targan. And then Threshnasus is probably like the fairest of the 3 decks in a sense. There's decent amount of interactivity. You have a lot of like board sweepers. You prevent Thresh from leveling up, or Gnosis and Thresh from leveling up. And I mean, I don't get why they have Deny in their regions, but beyond that, feels pretty fine.
Okay, thank you for that explanation there. Appreciate it. And yeah, let's keep on going. So from there, we're going to get to a question about diversity. Would you guys say the current meta is diverse? We did get one new deck to kind of experiment with from the recent expansion, the Guardians of the Ancient expansion. And most of what we are currently experimenting with otherwise kind of has been here. But considering that, would we still say that the meta that we're currently experiencing is still diverse? I will start with closing time. Kinda. Okay. Let's go Drizoth.
I would say kinda as well.
All right. And then Jay?
I would say it's worse than last season. I'm not sure if that's a no or a kind of.
Worse than last season. Okay. I will go with closing time on this one. Expand on kinda.
All right. It really depends on whether you're asking about ladder or you're asking about tournaments. I think we haven't gotten tournaments in this setting yet, so it's going to be hard to tell whether, it's hard to tell whether the tournament meta will be more diverse than it was for the last seasonal. But the last seasonal was, if I'm not incorrect, one of the least diverse tournament environments we've ever had. You might be able to say something about that, Joseph?
Yeah, I saw a small section of tournament data, not for seasonals, but I saw a small section. And something like 60 or 70% of lineups had either Threshnasus or TLC, and often both.
Yeah, it was unbelievably diverse. Right, and honestly, I don't really see that much changing. I mean, TLC kind of gets booted with, Azerelia coming in, but I think that pairing is going to be very common too. In terms of ladder, though, I have zero complaints. I think it's very diverse, and I rarely run up against the same deck twice, and if I do, it's because people are loving the Azerelia deck. And once again, I don't think I have a problem with that. So,
okay, this question's a little beside the point, but it's just something that I've heard as a counter argument to what you just said as far as ladder being diverse. A lot of people are saying it feels like a coin flip, though, where it's extremely matchup-y, and it's hard to actually gain any LP for that reason.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a thing that goes back to the first question. So on the first question of like, is Azerelia healthy? I don't mind its win rate in the abstract, and I don't mind its play rate. I think it just has way too polarized matchups across the board.
And that's kind of my opinion as well.
I didn't consider that.
That deck has so many matchups that are unlosable, and has so many matchups that are unwinnable. And if Azerelia is 30% of ladder, and 60% of its matchups are unlosable for some party, whether it's the player of Azerelia or the opponent of Azerelia, that's a pretty miserable ladder experience where just like 30% of your games, a lot of them are just coin flips, basically, of am I...
Just as one point to take back the question real quick. I think that in diverse metas, you do tend to get pretty coin flippy matchups. That's not always the case, certainly, but it can be the case because you can't prepare for every deck you're running into, and therefore you simply just jam the best deck that you can. And I'm not preparing for TLC, I'm not preparing for Thresh Nasus, I'm just trying to put an efficient pile together, and sometimes you're going to run up against matchups that just kind of demolish you because you didn't prepare.
That is fair. Yeah, that's super fair. I definitely agree with some of the sentiments echoed from Drizoth, especially as far as like Malphite. He cannot exist with a Zero Aurelia being as popular as it is. So it's an interesting situation, but I do tend to err as like, yeah, for the most part, it does seem pretty diverse. So thank you all. Let's keep moving on. And our next question is going to be, can decks that focus on strategies using numerous landmarks actually be viable currently in Runeterra? So we have, and we've had a champion focused on a landmark for a little bit now in Talia, where she wants multiple landmarks to be played so that she can level and then copy a good landmark and then get double that effect. And then we also have Lysandra, even though she's mainly just played for the Watcher, she does have the strategy that would use the Thralls. And now we have Malphite, who also prefers for landmarks to be played. At this current moment, I would say that most of us believe none of those strategies are really that viable. So I'm curious if there will be a strategy that can be viable with numerous landmarks being a center of the game plan, considering that you're putting down these things that take up unit slots and have to use unit mana, but they cannot block when they're in their landmark form. So let's start with closing time on this one. What are your thoughts?
Just to make sure, you're saying in the future?
I'm saying actually currently. So currently
with the cards printed.
Yes, with the cards printed, have we just not found the most optimal way to go about these decks that want to just keep playing landmarks and that are focused on those landmark champions? I'm sorry. Continue.
It's gonna be a no for me, dog.
It's gonna be a no. Okay, yeah. Let's go, Drizoth.
Yeah, I'm actually glad Time asked that question because this sounded like two questions. One of like hopeful future seeing.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I meant right now. Yeah.
It's fine. I just think like landmarks aren't inherently a problem, and like you certainly could make this archetype work in the future. But with the current card pool, I would say absolutely not. They're just too bad.
They're too bad. Okay. And we have an interruption on Jason. So
you've angered him. He's gone. I'm
with
sorry.
This question.
I think we all wanted to answer yes, but
I think the best summation of like how problematic the current landmark cards are is Lysandra generating a Frozen Thrall is a downside.
I saw a few people getting a little excited about getting like 3 Frozen Thralls down with Talia.
I will say they managed to make the deck playable.
Yeah.
It is not abysmal anymore, but...
Yeah, it's pretty high rolly, but I guess not abysmal. All right, Jay, since you are back, what was your answer on this one? And I did mean right now. I guess I got a little ahead of myself, but right now, can a deck that is centered around landmarks be viable?
I think you're muted, buddy.
Oh, you're muted, Jay.
Centered around landmarks is a weirdly vague question. I think like Targon's Peak was like playable last season. I mean, it has Peak, it has Ravine. Most Deus decks sometimes run Prep, although I don't think that's like your question.
Yeah, more so hard focusing on it. Yeah, like leveling champions that want them and stuff like that.
Malphite deck viable? I mean, like the landmarks right now are kind of poop, so I'm gonna say no.
You're gonna say no. Okay. I think we all know, and Drizoth already kind of went into details, so no need to go any further on this exact point. So let's move on to our next question, which is going to be, do new champions Malphite and Zilean need buffs or better cards to support their strategies more in order to be viable? So I think a quick thing, anytime a new champion or new cards come out, especially champions, and they're not that good, people want to see them buffed right away, but sometimes they actually just need better resources to utilize within their given strategies. So is it buffs or support cards that we need for Malphite and Zilean? Let's start with Drizoth.
I to be honest, like we've seen both approaches work previously with other cards. I mean, like I remember very distinctly at the start of Rising Tides, Fizz was considered unplayable, and we saw how that went. So no changes were made to that card, and something certainly happened. So I think you could do either. I think Malphite's more in the territory of needing buffs, and Zillion's more in the territory of needing cards, but you could do either.
Okay. What about you, Jay?
I agree. Although I think it's flipped. I think Malphite is probably in need of better support cards, whereas Zillion is in need of buffs.
Okay. And then you, closing time?
I'm just gonna go in the camp of both need better support cards.
Both need better support cards. Okay. Let's go with your point, Jay. I actually want to hear why, because I kind of lean towards Malphite needing the buff. I think for what he does at 7 mana, it's just he costs too much. So I'm curious as to why you think better support would help him as opposed to a buff.
I mean, I think Malphite could use both, but I think for
Okay.
Zillion, he already has like a. I guess it kind of depends on what you call like a support card. If you just want like jam predict cards in Zillion and call it a support, I think there are some like pretty good support cards that don't see play because Zillion like doesn't work, right? So I think Zillion needs a buff there. I think Malphite on the other hand, his support cards are kind of like the landmarks, right? The kind of like lead up to the payoff, and there really is no lead up right now, and I mean there's no payoff really either. So Malphite probably needs both, but I think it needs like the leading up part to be improved a lot more before he can even get there.
You don't like Eye of the Raharok? I thought that was going to be a great one.
I like the concept.
Okay.
I was optimistic, but it did not work out.
It did not work out. Okay. Well, thank you for going into details there. Let's keep going. And our next question, and we're almost to the end of it. Our next question is going to be, what is your biggest pet peeve currently surrounding Legends of Runeterra? Does not have to be meta related. I do like to incorporate a little bit more of a bigger picture discussion within meta discussions, just so we're always able to engage on these kind of other thoughts that are still very important surrounding Legends of Runeterra. And there's definitely been a hot topic going on right now within the scene, so I would definitely like to hear, starting with, let's go with closing time again. What is one of your biggest pet peeves?
I think it is that Shurima has a couple really insanely good cards, and then just a ton of really bad cards. And I would love to see that balanced out, or just balanced out.
Okay, let's go with Drizoth.
Mine, that complaint actually is like subsumed into part of mine. Mine is kind of how balancing decisions have changed over time, and it really shows as like old regions versus new regions, and it shows with old champions versus new champions. And I think the complaint about Shurima is part of my complaint, and like complaints about Azir compared to, or I guess like the classic one would be the Hunter versus Callista. Of like, what are these two cards doing in the same game?
That makes a lot of sense. And Jay.
I think that was a good one. Maybe kind of leads into like the design of champions now, but I think it's pretty evident how undertuned some removal options are. Just like being able to stick a 0 on the board for like the whole game until you lose feels really bad. Not being able to remove landmarks feels really bad. I remember everyone panicking about Soothsayer. Not that I like shit up landmarks or whatever, because that was totally redundant, but the removal in this game right now isn't working as it might need to be.
That is extremely fair. I want to hear a little bit more from Drizoth on his point, though. If you can expand a little further.
I actually want to like respond quickly to Jason's.
Yeah.
I actually prefer the idea of like direct removal just being bad. Like Vengeance just is a 7 mana card instead of other game. It might cost it like 5 or 4. If you're even talking Magic, it might cost 2. I actually like that. I think that's enjoyable because it makes the game more about combat. Unfortunately, they have also created champions and cards more generally. Mountain Sky is the most egregious one that just refuse to enter combat. And I don't think those design philosophies can healthily coexist, where you've got like this Twisted Fate, which like if Twisted Fate had to enter combat to matter, everything's fine. But he just doesn't, and then you're stuck. And I mean, they clearly tried to solve this a little bit with Vulnerable and Challenger, which I thought were really good innovations. But if you don't have the attack token, neither of those do anything. And like, it was really bad with TFIz, where they'd be like, "Oh, it's my attack token. I'm going to play Twisted Fate, and I'm going to level him before you get a token." And it's like, oh, I just don't have counterplay.
That's an extremely fair point. I want to just ask one follow-up question. Do you have a way of navigating that as further than Vulnerable?
Yeah. So there was my guess is this is actually probably in the pipeline, because there's a bunch of stuff that's been starting free attacks lately. And when everybody was talking about Twisted Fate, I was reminded of these old cards from Magic. Really long time ago, they stopped printing them, that basically forced your opponent to attack. And it's like, you could relate it to a League of Legends ability, which is obviously where Runeterra gets a bunch of inspiration, with like Charm. And so like, Ari has a champ spell of Charm. Let's say it's like 1 mana burst, and it charms a unit. And that unit gets a free attack. Whenever this turn, it gets an attack. But if it doesn't attack, it just does. So it's like, you get to pick when to attack with this unit, and you can attack with other units if you want. But this unit is attacking this turn, or it dies. You can make that choice as well.
Okay.
And I think that'd be a way of solving it. And you can kind of spread this like pseudo challenger that works when you don't have the token. Or even better, it would work when like you do have the token, where it's like, okay, I'm playing Fiora Shen or whatever, or some Demacia Ionia mid-range deck, and I have a dragon in play and I want to attack with it. And I go, your like key unit has to attack into my dragon for me to then attack. Or we can both skip and your unit just dies.
I don't want to think about having to free attack my Fiora into your like screeching dragon. That sounds horrifying.
It really does, and I would be very interested to see how different that would change things. I can see a lot of complaints one way or the other, but I appreciate the suggestion for sure. Let's keep it pushing. Sorry,
I want to respond to that, because I'm actually like, is that really any different than single combat? Or they just say your Fiora is attacking and blocked by my screeching dragon?
Yeah, to an extent. Well, I guess it then matters how many regions would have access to what you're suggesting. Sure. That's what would matter then, because obviously we know how amazing that single combat feels at times, but that is unique to Demacia. So you are forced to at least build that deck within Demacia. So yeah, it would mean how much of the pool of cards or regions have access to this strategy you're suggesting then.
I don't think you need to try and solve this problem for every single region for it to be enough. I think we just kind of need to get away from backline. Champions are the really obvious examples of it, but backline units more generally. I think Mountain Scryer is like the only big one that is really impactful as a backline unit.
That is extremely fair. Very understandable too. All right, we got our last two questions here. Question 11 is going to be, what keeps you coming back to Legends of Runeterra and wanting more? Definitely got to balance out a little bit of the negativity with something a little bit more positive. And this is a game I think we're all very passionate about and love. And even with the complaints, we enjoy the direction things have been going. So I would like to hear what exactly keeps all of you guys coming back. Let's start with Jay on this one.
It's a good one. I think coming from Hearthstone, I love the game. The game's a lot more interactive than what I was kind of used to going forward. But I'm gonna say I love the people, honestly.
Okay, the people, the community.
I met a lot of people like coming into like the community when I started playing a little bit more like competitively, if you even call it that. And everyone's been really supportive. And I know there's like some people who've like Rigby or something like that who like kind of made out on their own, and they're like stepping their toes in, and it seemed really cool to just like get to know them as well.
Heck yeah. All right, let's go closing time.
Wow, I have to follow that up. My answer's gonna feel so like sad. Well, honestly though, coming off of what we said, this might sound silly, but it's the fact that there's so few non-games. Even the fact that there are more polarizing matchups now, every game feels like there is play, which is just incredible coming from Magic. It is so rare to have a game that no decision mattered, that there are just so many decision points and so many interesting things, but it rarely feels overwhelming either. And that is addicting in its own right, and I really like that feeling.
Oh, that was a really good answer. You didn't have to downplay that. All right. And Drizzoff.
I actually have much of a similar comment to time of like very often in card games they either end up as like long drawn out affairs like Magic, or they just kind of like water it down. And I mean that was a really common complaint with Hearthstone right when it was releasing of like this game is kind of cool, but it's just a watered down Magic. And I think that's a little bit of an excessive complaint, but there's certainly some sentiment of like Hearthstone removed this back and forth play of like I play something and you respond to it, I play something and you respond to it, and Runeterra does this really good job of um, shortening like a full card game experience. Magic's not unique about it. There's been a bunch of card games that managed to do that, but um, no other digital game managed to get this like back and forth conversational style. I know the devs call it into a digital format and it not take. I mean, you could play Magic online and it takes 50 minutes to play a match. And,
That is
it's a little time consuming.
yeah, that is very fair. And me coming from a Yu-Gi-Oh background, I know how they just kind of ruined a lot of what they kind of had going with Yu-Gi-Oh when they started implementing all these cards that couldn't be destroyed through combat, and then the game just went through a whole different realm once they started making these cards. And obviously Legends of Runeterra is still early in its lifespan, but so far so good as far as not implementing anything that makes the entire game start to feel bad. I would say so. I agree with everything you guys said. The community, the way the game feels, and the direction we've been going on. Really good stuff. All right, well, we got one last question here. Well, not really a question. It's actually asking you guys to do something, and that is give your best argument as to why Azir Aurelia does or does not need to be nerfed. This is obviously once again going to be the hot topic right now, so I would just love to hear what your guys' thoughts on this are, and exactly what the supporting argument is for how you feel on this. So I will, I guess, start this one with Drizoth, because I know you've kind of had a lot to say about this one. So let's get things started with you.
This one's really hard because, to be honest, I don't think it should be nerfed in kind of the abstract. I like Aurelia Azir's overall power level. I dislike how polarized its matchups are. So I'd like to see power like moved around in the deck. We take power out of these cards like Azir, Emperor's Dais as well, that are just really hard for its good matchups to interact with. For like TLC, if you play an Azir on 3 is like incredibly favored to win. Like even just a Dais on 2, they just have incredible issues ever getting into that game. And I'd like to move it into like, oftentimes its bad matchups have to do with its bad ability to block, and I'd like to see some of the cards become better blockers, and we take away some of this like raw, unbridled aggression power from the deck.
Okay, so you want to see things shifted, not nerfed. Okay.
Correct. I'd like to see changes, but not outright nerfs.
Not outright nerfs. Okay, your opinion. Let's go closing time on this one.
I think my answer is like a little cop out, but I just think it's too early. I mean,
Okay.
we're a week from release,
Neither.
which means that and it means that it. I mean, maybe there's a really killer Malphite deck out there that we just haven't found that is truly just the Aurelia Crusher. But while I think that is unlikely, it's too early. It's just a little too early to say.
That's extremely fair. It's definitely like super early, and who's to say that there's not just some other decks that aren't optimized? So I could get behind that. In your opinion, Jay?
I think when I think of Azir Aurelia, I kind of think of Go Hard. Not that the decks do the same thing per se, but I feel like they kind of share like similar qualities in the sense that they're relatively consistent. They can either run predicts, they have some decent amount of card draw with like the bouncing water droplets. They have a lot of value generation. They have a win condition that doesn't necessarily sometimes feel very fun to play against, and they are somewhat oppressive by nature. They kind of limit certain decks from playing, like Lee Sin just kind of disappeared once Aurelia started coming in, and similar decks like that I feel it needs to be tuned to some degree. I wouldn't be able to tell you which card, which region, whether that be the Ionia part or the Shrima part, but it doesn't really feel that fun to play against, especially if you're queuing with like a bad matchup and not particularly targeting it on ladder. So I think it kind of needs to be touched up.
Okay, and as far as our thoughts on it as a tournament deck, we need to see more before we really know if it's going to feel bad in tournaments, or what are our thoughts there? You
So,
can start. Drizzle.
I think this is like really, really interesting from a perspective of region lock, which gets into like the different formats. Like Fight Night is the most prominent region lock format, and at Fight Night you can't play Thresh Nasus and Azir Aurelia, which I think is an interesting tournament lineup question. Which of these two decks do you think is more relevant to play? As soon as you start talking like every other format, it becomes terrible because you basically are like, oh, I can just play both. Problem solved. Play both busted decks. No problem.
I will say, my hot takes are often really trash, so like take this with a grain of salt. But Azir Aurelia, to me, strikes me as not a very good tournament deck. Usually the decks with very polarized matchup tables are not nearly as good of tournament decks as, like your TLCs of last season and your Thresh Nasuses. So I have some hope that it won't just run the tables. We'll see.
Okay.
And I feel like the opposite end is kind of fine, right? If you're bad into Azir Aurelia, you just ban it. If they're targeting your lineup, you probably just lose anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're designing a lineup that wants to ban Azir Aurelia because it does poorly into it, then like that's like your strategy, right? That's what people have historically done with whatever deck's the strongest.
The absolute worst case, in my opinion, is where we become a tournament meta where basically everyone is playing TLC, Thresh Nasus, and Azir Aurelia, and you're literally playing rock, paper, scissors. Where you're just like, I hope I banned their rock and they banned my.
God, I hope that's not the case.
Well, like, I guess we're all going to, we're all going to stay with our fingers crossed that that's not what the future holds. But definitely all some super good opinions to follow up on that as far as the tournament meta, because I think it's always good to always throw that in there because of how inherently different ladder and tournament feel. And right now, I feel like since we haven't really had any tournaments or big tournaments, we're only filling this deck on ladder. So it's easy to be like, all right, hate it on ladder, and then not really understand how it's going to feel in tournaments. So thank you all for your time and for hanging with me for this video. I think this once again is a very solid way to kick off a brand new series, and I hope everyone enjoys it, and I hope this is a good way to get some meta discussion rolling that isn't just the typical ways that we have it right now. There'll be links in the descriptions to all of these wonderful people's socials. You definitely want to follow them. They all produce amazing content, and I enjoy watching them. And more to come, so definitely be on the lookout for more episodes. And once again, make sure you guys, I will post it in the comment section, but there'll also be a link in the description of the video to the questionnaire so that you guys can answer these questions yourself, so you can get a little bit more of a feel from the overall community on this, and then see how the answers maybe differed from our guests today. But yeah, thank you guys. I'll see you guys in the meantime. You guys stay safe, and peace out, YouTube.